questions. Just hold on quickly. Yes, I can gewoon een Zoom talk in. Okay, bye.
Well, we're live on YouTube, which is good already. But
Oh,
I can edit this bit out, which is good.
It was just even phoning.
What a fucker. Cool. Actually, so like the YouTube thing's all good. So you people are already joining, which is good. So I can just intro this whenever.
Much.
Why not?
It's just your finger.
What do you mean my finger?
Or is mine frozen up?
What's frozen?
Hello all.
There we go. Or is mine frozen up?
What's frozen?
Hello all.
There we go. Gus, are we on?
Yeah, are we on? Yeah, but you're on YouTube or you're on Instagram Live? Oh, there you are.
I'm on everything, man.
Well, hello everyone. We've got another episode of Wine and Viticulture Education, but there's 3 of us. There's no Instagram Live, so you have to go to YouTube now. We are already live. So in my bio or Dylan's bio, we are with Jaco from Visual Viti, which is going to be an amazing talk on basically the future, or what should have been the future of vineyard planning. So it'll be less of me and more of, well, them discussing it, because yeah, this is mind blowing. Dylan, does your forehead have anything else to say, seeing as your forehead?
My forehead is just battling with hanging a banner on the Insta Live, but I think I've just commented. I don't know how to hang it up there, but I think you can hang it up, Gus.
Yeah. Well.
No, thank you. Thanks for the intro, Gus. Sorry, we're just battling with technology here on our on our viticulture, deep dive into viticulture, but not usually into technology, but today is technology in agriculture or in viti. Maybe that's going to be a future topic, but there's this whole branch of agriculture which uses the technology that now has infiltrated our lives, that we use for paying bills. We've got it in our pockets. It's our phones, drones, planes. There's just this massive swathe of data that's constantly being collected. And one way to look at this data is through GIS. So if there's data points that are collected and they have latitude and longitude on them, then they can be mapped. Now, we're lucky enough to have Jaco with us, who's from South Africa. We've been mates for a little while, and when we get on talking viti, it kind of spirals out of control. So Gus doesn't know what he's up for, but we are going to talk a little bit about GIS, which if you're pre-planting a vineyard, for example, you can look below the soil and by electromagnetic radiation, then you can use satellites, drones, whatever information you can get and map above the soil to try and visualize and better understand relationships with your site, your varieties, and the final wine. And Jaco, why don't you give us your take on GIS, and then we'll just freestyle it from there.
We'll see you on YouTube, everyone. Go over to YouTube now if you want to ask questions.
Okay,
cool. Welcome, Jaco.
Yes, thanks for having me. I'm Jaco Engelbrecht. I'm a viticulturist that's fascinated by using technology and remote sensing, and we're fortunate in South Africa to have quite a lot of guys that's really on high tech. Not necessarily in viticulture, but I've got a few mentors in GIS, which is Geographical Information Systems, and like I told you earlier, Gus, I was like 21 years old, and I sat around the table with a few older viticulturists. They were then as old as I am now, 33. And I thought, shit, I want to wait 30 or 20 or 10 years to figure out what they know. So I was looking for a shortcut. And then I found GIS and I found spatial mapping. And I've been doing it for the past 12 years. And it's from something that was in the beginning kind of like a Mount Everest in front of me to figure out a new science. It's spiraled into a obsession to mapping new vineyards, new areas. And it's a technology that we're going to discuss it throughout this session. It's technology that should be used way more, especially where we are in a climatic or a climate change scenario, where we have regions that's already warmer than ours, and we can go and see what happens with them and how they planted and what they've got. And bringing in new varieties, we can kind of get golden threads from them in their current areas where they planted, and getting that linked to the wines to have a better understanding of how vineyards and varieties react in different scenarios. So we'll run through two scenarios during our discussion. One was a Grenache scenario that I did about 3 or 4 years ago, comparing the Picanieres Kloof in South Africa with Priorat in Spain. And then there's a new development that we're busy now with, where we've studied Côte Rôtie, and we're developing a new vineyard in Stellenbosch according to a little bit of blueprints from that. So yeah, so that's the basics. GIS is a complicated field of science, especially mapping in different regions and different countries. Everybody has different spatial references and different rules and sets. And America does feet and inches, and we do centimeters and kilometers. And yeah, so everything is new mapping in America. But luckily, the Californian government got amazing data. And so mapping in a global global context, the biggest challenge is getting proper data and ground truthing that data. That's the biggest.
But also, is it not the biggest challenge? I mean, I've done a little bit of GIS, and I'm kind of getting sucked back into it in this postdoc. But man, how long have you been working on it? Because the amount of times, you click through, you're working, you got a walkthrough of how to get from A to B, and then you're like, where the hell did my points go? Where's my map? Doesn't it sometimes just do your head in? It's not easy, right?
Completely. But I've got, like I said, I mean, there's a website that you guys can check out. It's South African based website, so it won't have any relevance for people, but you can go and see the dynamics we've got in our country. So it's called Cape Farm Mapper, and it's a GIS resource mapping website that's run by a friend of mine, and he works for the Department of Agriculture, FC Vasson. So I told Gus I phone up FC quite often and ask him, listen here, dude, can you help me with this and this and this? And he's like, all right, let's quickly team view. And he just asked me like, what the hell is going on in your project? I mean, everything's all over the show. And I said, dude, I'm not a specialist, but my results are right, isn't it? He's like, yeah, but how did you get to it? And I show him. And he just sometimes just shakes his head. So yeah, definitely. I mean, it was a process. I started out first mapping with Quantum GIS, which is open source software. But when you really
is that QGIS? Is it?
QGIS, yeah, it's QGIS.
Yeah, okay.
So when I really wanted to get into the nitty gritty of getting into proper solar radiation maps and models, unfortunately for me, the only alternative was getting it properly right was buying enterprise software, ArcGIS, which was for a 25-year-old to buy that individually was a hell of a lot of money. I paid more for that software than I did for my car. So it was quite a big step. But I've never looked back. I mean, the software is amazing, and the models that we built from that is just amazing. But yeah, it was a daunting task starting in the beginning. Luckily, I've got a little bit of programming background. I did programming in school, so I understand a little bit of script. And when I was 5 years old, I started writing DOS programs. A lot of people don't even know what DOS is, but
we too, man. We used to write batch files when we'd have to bridge those little floppies, 14 discs to get Duke Nukem over to your mate's house.
For 1 meg.
Yeah.
14 copies for 1 meg. So I had to write my own Explorer because there wasn't something like Explorer in DOS. So luckily I have got a bit of background, so I understand scripting a little bit. I'm not good. I won't say I can script anymore or program, but it helped me a lot.
But that kind of
But
helped, and you were self-taught, yeah. So that's why people look at it and think, "Wow, how did you get to this path?" But the results you've got are pretty wild and compelling.
yeah, yes, let's get into it.
Yeah, can we bring it back? We got people watching. A lot of people that you know, Viti nerds like us. They're into grapes. They're into wine. So, what do you think? Should we run through a little scenario of if someone wanted to plant a vineyard?
Yes.
You know, in the old days, what would you do? You'd walk out there and you'd be like, right, here's some dirt. That guy over there, yeah, that guy's planted this variety, or you'd use the history of the region, and maybe you do some soil analysis, but you'd pretty much just wing it. Whereas now we can use, you know, EM38 electromagnetic resonance to get a map of what's under the ground and tell us where we should even dig a hole. Yeah, is that right?
So let's start with just with the basic concept of why we are mapping with GIS. Maybe that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Like, why do we use this technology, and why is it relevant? So I'm not very good in biology with viticulture or vines. That's why we've got you, Dylan. So, and then you've got a doctor in front of your name as well. So then I feel even more comfortable asking you questions. So,
get on the couch.
The basic is anything on the planet that has green in it is something that will create energy, or uses energy from the sun and creates a life source of energy for itself. And that in essence is a solar panel. All right. So a leaf, every leaf of a vine is basically a solar panel. It uses energy from the sun. It translates that into carbohydrates, into carbon molecules, etc., etc. And that's where the process comes in, where they produce thiols, methoxypyrazines, anthocyanins, all of those wonderful things that makes wine amazing. That all gets done from the sun. Obviously, you have your roots in the ground as well, which also plays an important role, but the plant can't grow in the night. So if there's no sun, there's no life. And there's exactly the same with the solar panel. In some sites, you will have a solar panel that can create more energy or transmit more energy, and some sites get less energy, and it depends on the angle of the sun and the intensity of the sun at that specific time. So that's the basics of what's happening, and that's the thought pattern I had behind it when I started mapping with GIS. Is what are we trying to understand? Like, we're talking about a southern slope that someone planted on a southern slope, but what's the inclination of that slope, and how does that inclination of the slope impact the angle that the sun rays hit that slope? And then when you plant a vine there, then that vine is going to receive that energy. And how are we going to manage that energy? And each variety handles energy differently. So that's the basics of how we start mapping. And that's where solar radiation came in, because solar radiation or solar irradiation takes into account the whole terroir study of elevation, slope, aspect, sunlight hours or direct daylight hours. And that you build a very complicated model that sets out energy. So solar radiation must never be confused with temperature. It's not the same. It doesn't relate.
Yeah.
It's potential energy that needs to be translated, yeah, because you've still got the interface of the soil, so yes. It's potential energy that's hitting the sites, and then you've got the vine as the mediator. So you've got some varieties that are slow growing in building and using that energy, and others that are just like bam, run like puppies.
Yeah, I mean, you've had the discussion. I mean, I asked some question about isohydric and anisohydric varieties, and I've told you a few times. I mean, I always use the analogy. We all have two friends at a party. The one that just continues drinking and going crazy till like 4 o'clock in the morning, and he's just completely smashed the next day. And that's Syrah. Syrah doesn't know when to stop. So the more energy you're going to give him, the like crazier he's going to go. And then you've got a friend like Grenache, and Grenache handles it way better. So Grenache will be your friend like 10 o'clock. You'll realize, but where's Grenache now? And you realize, but he's scaly drinking some water in the kitchen. And like 11 o'clock, he's out of there. And next morning when everybody wakes up from the hard party, you'll come back from a 10-kilometer jog and say, yes, guys, how's the day going to go? And it's just because Grenache utilizes energy and wind and everything in himself better. So knowing something simple like that already, just for those two varieties, there's a model that you can build from that to understand better, like how is this variety going to react? And how is the specific site going to impact both the growing of the vine, but also like in the end of the day, how's the wine going to be? Like, what can we expect? Do you want to jump into a Grenache one now, or do you want to chat about something else?
No, let's hit it. Show us some pictures. It's not going to help.
We love Grenache. We all love Grenache.
When they commute to work.
It's transformative.
Yeah. All right. So a few years ago, I started trying to figure out why. Okay, so first stylistically, Dylan, you worked and lived a little bit in Priorat as well, so you can confirm this. So the Grenaches in Priorat has got a little bit more alcohol than the Grenaches out of, say, south of France or even South Africa. And South Africa is always... I can
concur that is correct.
Okay. So South Africa is always seen as an extremely hot country, and yes, it is. I mean, I live in Paarl and Wellington, and it gets scorching hot here. But something is different in the Preconsolidation Kloof, and we wanted to figure out like why and what's going on there. So I hope everybody can see my map.
Can you zoom out and pull back in to give us some reference for people who don't know?
All right, so everybody, this is South Africa, and we are not Africa. Africa is huge, all right? So for everybody from America listening in, Africa is a massive continent, all right? And South Africa is a country in Africa at the bottom tip. And there's Cape Town, there's Stellenbosch and Paarl, and the Preconsolidation Kloof is right here between the Piketberg Mountains and the Citrusdal mountain range. All right, that's where the Preconsolidation Kloof is. So the relevance of Preconsolidation Kloof is the elevation. So if you're in the Preconsolidation Kloof and you look to the west, you have the cold Atlantic Ocean to the west. And believe me, it plays a huge role in this mountain range. Wow. And then the next is, it's about 595 to almost 800 meters above sea level in some sections. So it's quite high up as well. It's not a small little hill. So if you look at the Preconsolidation Kloof, so this is a solar radiation or irradiation model that I've built for this whole section. So you can see there's major variation. This is at a 20 meter per pixel scale. So it's not very intensely intense data. So you can see we kind of have like 3,136 to 5,800 watt per hour per square meter. This is measured for 1 day. You can measure it per week, per month, per year. The energy source just changes from watt per hour to joules or kilojoules, but the relation will always stay the same. All right, because a lot of people ask me.
The measurement of the energy, and does it matter which day of the year that you're taking this?
Yes, it does. It'll change every day. But the maximum minimum will always stay the same because your northeast, southwest will always stay the same. So these models are constants. All right, you don't have to do this model like every week or every month or every year. If you do it once, unless we get like an earth-moving earthquake, and like everything changes, then you can maybe redo it. But I think viticulture and GIS mapping will be the last on your mind then. So,
what about the influence of the climate variability? Does that influence the irradiation, or is that more associated with rainfall and weather?
The only thing that does influence solar irradiation is the transmittivity, meaning like how clean is the air. Like obviously, if you've got a cloudy day, it'll be different. So we basically use the standard of ArcGIS, which is 0.5 transmittivity. But when we've got weather stations all around as well, where we use solar radiation measurement instruments, which measures in megajoules. And you can convert that megajoules to watt per hour, and then you can translate that into a transmittivity, and then you can build a real transmittivity model. But the relation between the top and the bottom stays the same.
Important, yeah.
All right, so the maximum is not going to become more and the minimum less. The ratio is going to stay the same. So instead of having 5,800, you might have 7,800, but the bottom will also move from 3,100 to 5,100. So the ratio relationship will stay the same. Okay. All right. So when we look at something like Picaniere's kloof, all right, we see the solar radiation, even for South African context, is relatively high. Like anything in South Africa above 5.2 is considered high, and anything below, say, 4.9 is considered low. It is completely opposite in Europe, depending on where in Europe you are, and it changes everywhere. All right, so the value of the model can't be translated to a model in, say, Burgundy or in the Loire or in Adelaide Hills or wherever. You have to build new models, and those models need to be measured against each other, but you get a golden thread from that. Mm-hmm. So basically, if you have a look at the Picaniere's kloof grenaches, you'll see this grenache here, and this grenache here, this grenache here, and let me just get that one. So these grenaches are all in this band that looks north to northeast. In the southern hemisphere, that is our warmer slopes, all right? Or in this case, the slopes that receives a potential of very, very, very high radiation. Something like 5,800 is extremely high in South African context. So what does that mean from a terroir perspective, all right? The first thing it means is these solar panels is going to be on steroids, okay? So what the vines are going to do, the vines are going to be able to process their biological processes at an extremely fast rate. That means anthocyanins, it means tannins, it means all the precursors to fruit profiles and stuff will be, this system is running at optimal, all right?
And they're also in damage control with their anthocyanin or the antioxidant production because of the irradiation being so high from as early as flowering, yeah?
Yes, but
so no problem with color.
No, definitely not. The important thing that we learned from this study, and remind me to come back to this, Dylan, because this was the second part of the study, because we needed the second part to figure out what was going on with grenaches. All right, so now we have this. All right, so now we know what's going on in Picaniere's kloof, kind of, and now we move to Spain. All right. So
we're out of quarantine now.
We are quarantined because of the flu.
All right, we've had our 14 days. We're in Spain now. Great.
Let's just give people a proximity. So there's Barcelona, Catalonia, and Priorat is round about here. If you guys can see my little hand going on, you'll see the northeastern part of Spain. All right. So we go in, and let's go to this vineyard. All right. So if you have a look at this vineyard in Spain, it's also a Grenache vineyard. The radiation is considerably lower than it is in South Africa. All right, considerably, or more than half.
Half
the radiation.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
So what does this mean? It means that the solar panels, that is the vine and the leaves, will have a much more relaxed and slower process of physiological ripeness. All right. So this was important for us. And then we look at another one. This is a Lermita one. I tagged them in my post. Hopefully they're looking. They can. This is free consultation, Dylan. You know all of this.
Dylan does a lot of that anyway. So
I do. Anyone that DMs me know it.
If Dylan and I
sometimes too much.
If Dylan and I could charge each other consultation for just talking to each other, we would have been millionaires by now. So
there's a feedback loop.
Okay, so now you see the radiation here. The maximum radiation in this vineyard is higher, but you can see the minimum radiation is way lower as well. Okay, so this vineyard is quite chilled as well with regards to physiological ripeness. And then you have a look at this vineyard, and this vineyard is actually a bit more intact, to say, like from the bottom to minimum. So this vineyard will have as a whole vineyard, I think this vineyard will be more uniformly physiologically ripe than the rest of the vineyards.
All 25 vines in there. There looks like there's a few misses, mate.
There's a few misses in a lot of vines in Priorat, if you can recall. You lived there.
Yes.
All right. So now what did we learn from this? So the one thing we learned from this study is, all right, so the Grenaches in Priorat grow at a lower radiation, and the Grenaches in Picanius Kloof in South Africa grow at a higher radiation. What does that mean? We know that the wines in Priorat has got higher alcohols, and we know the Grenaches in Picanius Kloof has got lower alcohols. But why is that? So we needed more information in that study. And that study took us to average temperatures. Can you guys see this?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So this is WorldClim data, but we also have a lot of data with real-time stations, because Picanius Kloof is actually a massive fruit growing area. And the interesting thing is, if you look at this scenario in the Picanius Kloof, this is average temperature for February. Now, February is our scorcher usually in South Africa. All right. And the average temperature in February in South Africa for this region is 20 degrees Celsius, which is very, very moderate.
Yeah.
It's very moderate. So what does that mean? It means that these vines, even though they're standing in the direct sun, there's air conditioners on them constantly. All right. So the sugar accumulation is not as quick as the physiological chemical compound assimilation. All right, so that's the important thing that we realized here. We pick our Grenaches between 13.2 and 14.2 alcohol, where the Grenaches, Dylan, correct me if I'm mistaken, is between 15 and 15.8, and sometimes 16 alcohol in Priorat.
Yeah, sometimes well more than that.
Well more than that. So the reason that is the average temperature for the growing season in Priorat is almost 4 degrees Celsius on average higher than the Picanius Kloof, which means that the sugar accumulation is at a quicker pace than it is with regards to the Picanius Kloof. And even though it sounds like something simple, it is at a fundamental impact of how we look at planting Grenaches, because now we understand both scenarios, all right? And now you can go into your regions, and now you can start mapping, all right? This is an elevation map, but you can basically map the whole Western Cape in a solar radiation map. You can map the whole Western Cape with an average temperature map. You can run a little query, a SQL query in the GIS software, and it'll show you exactly where the specific spots are for the best Grenaches. Isn't that amazing?
Wait, quickly, and as a real layman, so are you saying that Priorat should not grow Grenache?
I'm not saying that at all.
No, but and it's an interesting thing, because like on a consumer level, like Grenache sometimes misses the boat. People don't really get it. They see it as big alcohol. They don't really get it. And maybe that's partly because of its physiology, or is it just that people haven't tried something from where you're from, which is obviously a bit finer pointed? And I'm just thinking of it just on that way, is what should Priorat really be growing?
I don't think that's a scenario. I mean, the thing with these studies are there's no right or wrong.
Yeah, true.
This determines style, all right?
Yeah.
So
if you like big booze, you go Priorat.
Yeah, and it's a balance and a wine style thing too, which can also come down to not only your harvest date but your extraction.
I mean,
Yeah, true.
I know the alcohols in the pre-rut stuff's high, but I mean, I drank a lot of pre-rut Grenaches where the alcohol is so well hidden that I wouldn't have seen it.
Yeah.
So the wines are bloody well made. So
Just wild.
yeah, so I mean, these are two vineyards from some of the top Grenaches in South Africa. You can, I'm not going to name names. You guys can try and figure out yourself. So this is the relation. These are two Grenache Noirs to show you like the relation that they've got in solar irradiation compared to the ones in pre-rut.
And we're still in the same area. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I just took out two Grenaches, and these are the Grenache Blancs from that. You also see the variation in our Grenaches are minimal from a minimum.
The range is tiny.
It's tiny. So that means we don't have pockets in these vineyards that's not ripe. These vineyards are uniformly ripe every single time. And the weird thing is, I mean, this is where the oldest Grenaches in South Africa are. I mean, this Grenache here on top, this Grenache Blanc here is the oldest Grenache Blanc in South Africa. And there was a lot of Grenache all over South Africa, but it got ripped up. And the question is, why was the Grenache ripped up, even though it's a very heavy bearing variety? It's because the best was left. And these are the best Grenaches. And luckily, the guys in the Piccaninny's Kloof, I started realizing this, and they're planting a lot more Grenaches in the Piccaninny's Kloof. I'm heading there tomorrow with Eben. We're going to see 2 growers there, and they're farming phenomenally. But I mean, they also understand that there's something special going on. And like I said, it's a combination of the terroir, of the elevation that gives you this massive diurnal shift and cooler day temperatures, and very high radiation.
So irradiation and your day temperatures, or your continentality, like diurnal fluctuation. But what about in these models? Do you consider water holding capacity or rainfall, or how does that influence? Because you might have the sun beating down, and the plant is the engine trying to convert the water CO2. But if you don't have water, the engine stops.
Yeah,
so is that something that comes into play with this sort of thing as well?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a proper study to plant a new vineyard involves a lot of people. Like I told guys, I've got a very good team around me. I'm not a one-man show. I utilize a lot of very good soil scientists. I talk to a lot of guys that's doing EMs. I've got a phenomenal guy that helps me with my vineyard design planning. He's an engineer, surveyor. There's a lot of guys, and there's obviously my viticultural peers. I mean, if you have a viticulturist that operates in that area for a long time, he's the #1 go-to guy. And we've got a very, very tight team of viticulturists in South Africa, and there's very good guys here that's consulted all across the world. So the terroir study with regards to a geographical information study, like I do, is showing you the potential for a specific style of wine and variety. What you're referring to with water holding capacity, rainfall and stuff like that, that comes from a soil study, because that will determine which rootstock we're going to use. If we've dry farmed, like most of the stuff that I work with is dry farmed vineyards, it plays a crucial role in understanding what's really going on beneath the soil. So while we're on that topic, let me share the screen again. We utilize electromagnetic scanners quite often. I'm looking at a new company and new people at the moment to help us with that, because ground truthing these are really, really important. So to give you an idea, so this is what we call an EM scan, or electromagnetic scan. And the basics of an electromagnetic scan is it's a device that sends an electromagnetic pulse down into the ground. And once it gets to a section, or it can be either a change in fraction sizes from, say, clay to sand, or sand to clay. It can be the presence or the lack of salts, meaning sodiums and potassiums. And it can be the presence or the absence of water. So every time that EM scanner picks up a conductivity, it sends back to the receiver in the chamber a measurement of the electromagnetic conductivity. And that builds a visual of what's going on underneath the soil. It doesn't tell you what it is. It just shows you a very, very accurate model of what's going on. And that's
the super important point, that it doesn't tell you what it is, and you need to then ground truth it and measure and see what's driving the difference on this screen between those colors, red and green or yellow.
Yeah, so the way we do that is, I mean, obviously now I know where the variations are. So now I will get in a soil scientist, we sit with this map, and then we dig profile holes according to this variations. And that variation, we can then ground truth with this to build a proper soil map, meaning the soil mapping boundaries will be true and not guessed according to interpolation in GIS software. And that's important.
Wow.
That's important because there's a lot of people, there's a lot of maps, or there's this data you can freely get from satellites, and you might have your block imaged, and then it will split your block into high vigor and low vigor, and it will give it 4 colors. Yeah, okay, it's split it into high vigor and low vigor, but what's the range? You don't always get the range. It might be from 0.1 to 0.4, which is meaningless, versus instead of being, say, from 1 unit to 20. If you split those into 4, you'll still get exactly the same image, but you need to ground truth it to know that it has a basis in reality.
You can
ground truthing, big word everyone should know.
Yeah, definitely. All of this stuff needs to be ground truth. Like the way I ground truth all of my solar radiation models is by actually going to taste the freaking wine. Because the data doesn't mean squat if it doesn't relate into a wine, because what am I busy with now? So you get a lot of people that can do the science and then can do the software and stuff. But if you don't have your feet on the soil, understand how it feels during those times, understand every single day in that vineyard, and then translating it through to a wine, you can't really build these models at large scales because you don't know what the output is. Because you need the output to work back to the input and realize, what have we done to produce the wine that tastes like this?
And you need to know the moderator in the middle, which is the vine, and you mentioned the rootstock, but you also need to know how that's grown, and how is the trellis, how is the canopy management, how many buds were left. There's a big gap in the middle.
Also, you two, and we've also had a question, by the way, on YouTube.
Yes,
right.
Which is someone called Manfred, who said hi from Italy, and hello, Manfred, to you. And he was just asking, which was a bit back on when we were talking about sugar accumulation. He was saying, are higher sugars from vines processing and making more sugar, or is it just more hot and berries are losing water, hence higher sugar concentrations in the end?
There's a lot of, Dylan, I mean, you're a researcher as well. There's a lot of research on that. We've got Dr. Kobus Hunter in South Africa has written quite a few pieces on that. There is a specific threshold where sugar, I mean, Professor Delwar can obviously tell you the best of this. There's a specific sugar loading model where the plant will load sugar, but that's just to a specific point. From there on, you get to a point of no return where sugar accumulation is actually due to dehydration and not due to sugar accumulation. So there's a line, and then again we get back to isohydric and anisohydric varieties. They manage that differently, and a lot of things play an important part in this. And this, you need to understand what region you're working with, what your rainfall is, what your rootstock is, what clones you have. There's a lot of variabilities, and that's what make viticulture difficult but interesting.
Yeah, totally. And with the variety can be a huge driver. Some varieties are able to remain turgid and not lose so much water through dehydration and get that artificial maturity or that artificial sugar spike, whereas others, like let's just pick on Shiraz again, or Syrah, you know, the way that it develops and the way the brush connects to the inside of the berry, it loses moisture, so it can get that shrivel state and where the sugar just spikes.
Wow. Well, we're also about 35 minutes, but we could continue going for a bit, boys, if you'd like.
Yeah, come on. We're just gonna get another map out, weren't we?
Let's get another map out. Let's see Syrah.
Okay, so I just quickly want to show this, Dylan. So with regards to that previous map I showed you, we changed the direction of planting. So the reason why this planting map is on squares, because we're planting square, 2.8 by 2.8 meters. And you'll notice that in that section, the red section in this we ground truthed was a lot of sand. So we've got very little water holding capacity in that section. So if you planted from west to east, you would have planted through that.
And where are we where are we on the screen? Which way is west? What do we got?
North is up.
Okay, great.
North is up now. So if you plant from west to east or from left to right, then you would have gone through that variability zone in the soil. So that means that the left section, the middle section, the right section would ripen at different phases due to water stress. All right.
Wow.
But if we change it from north to south almost, remember it's bush vine while we're planting this we're going to head train it. So then we're planting in that zone, and you'll notice which varieties we put in there. It's the Grenache Blanc and Cinsault Blanc and a little bit of the Palomino, because those are the guys that take the punch the best. So you can utilize, and this is dry farmed as well, you can utilize your variety, the characteristics of and the resilience of the variety combination with the rootstock in order to make the best decision long term. And this all going to have an impact on the wine quality, wine style, and also on management during the rest of the life of that.
And very few people do this currently.
Very few people do this currently. Yes.
Yeah.
There's so many vineyards you see, Gus, where they're planted for mechanization, and they'll go from the top of the hill, down a hill, through a valley, up over another bit of the hill. And they'll be like, there's a classic region near where I live, where you can get huge variability from one end of the row to the other and in the middle of the row. And then you need to employ other technologies like variable, we talked about variable harvesting or different bin trailers or picking at different times. Whereas this tries to iron, or this makes an attempt or uses the data to iron out the variability from the start.
Yeah.
Okay. So Dylan, where are we now?
We're in France.
We're in France. Okay. So we're in the Rhone, we're in Côte-d'Or. So So for this development, okay, so this is going to be on Syrah, all right. But I want to drive home a message that we can do this on all foreign varieties as well, and we should be. And guys, like we discussed, I'm not going to mention any of the big companies, but big companies should be doing this, because they just they save time with this, not just money. So instead of trying and planting a variety and waiting 5 or 6 years to understand what's going on, you can map this, you can model it. You can model it very, very accurately. Like I said, in South Africa, I feel really comfortable because I've mapped a lot of vineyards in South Africa, and we know exactly what's going on.
Also, like the ecological impact's huge, isn't it? So like a huge company could potentially, like if they have an unnamed blend, they could just change, well, they could actually plant a variety that works for their climate. If they're planting on flats, massive flats, they could actually make massive ecological kind of changes.
Yeah, and you're saying, Jaco, you use it like a predictor. Like, for example, we go and find a Zinamavro vineyard in Greece, and then we map that, and then we have a look in Australia or South Africa or somewhere at conditions that would be similar to guess how it would grow. Is that what you do?
Yeah, no. So I look at new varieties. So we would take something like a Certico, and we would get like 10 vineyards of a Certico in Greece. But it's important to get the wine, not just any vineyard. All right. Because not all the Certico is good. All right. So you need to find the wines that are doing good. Then you need to find out which vineyards that come from. You map those vineyards. Then you get if you don't get all the answers from a normal GIS terrain study, then you have to go look at soils, you have to look at climate data, but it's all part of the study. I mean, you have to look at wind, because obviously in Greece, wind plays an important role. So then you come back, and then you've got a perimeter that they grow that vineyard in. And then you look at your sites, and you can say, listen here, let's look at the maximum and let's look at the minimum. And then you plant, because then you've planted at parameters that you already know. So once you get an outcome, wine outcome, you know exactly what is the right parameters to plant in. But just to plant on one parameter, then you don't know what the bottom end of the parameter is going to be. So that's really important. Anyway,
yeah,
so
you got to explore the variability.
Yeah, but I mean, if you plant something, if you explore something and you already know what the variabilities are, you can, I mean, there's values attached to it. Then the result can get pulled back to that. But once you plant something, you don't know what the parameters or the influences are. I'm in a fortunate position to work with a lot of my clients. Almost 95% of my clients are all, in quotation marks, natural winemakers. I mean, they don't screw around in the vineyard and they don't screw around in the cellar. I mean, what we farm and what we bring out of the grapes, that's kind of what you taste. I mean, no one uses yeast. They minimal influence of wood, if any. It helps me as a viticulturist to understand what we're busy with, because the translation from the grapes to the wine is way purer than it is in a large company where they chuck in generic yeasts and stuff like that.
Yeah, you're not masking it with wine science and trickery.
No. All right, so this is
back to France.
Okay, so this is a development what I'm doing for a client of mine in Stellenbosch. And the first one was when I walked onto the site, I immediately knew something was special on his site, and I knew what I wanted to map against. So, but it's a very, very expensive development, so I had to have ground truth information to pitch to get this going. So what I did is I knew that I want to plant Syrah on that site, and I'll show you now because it's going to translate and it's going to blow your mind, I hope. Otherwise, maybe this is not as good as I thought. So if you look at Côte Rôtie, this is not exactly on the borders, because I can't find freaking borders, because finding data in France is very, very difficult. You said something about an Italian guy that asked a question. I want to mention this. The Italians were the only people that ever helped me with GIS data, so thank you very much. There's a fantastic guy that helped me with data, and it was lucky to work with him. So this is the elevation of Côte Rôtie. Now let's go to the slopes of Côte Rôtie. So you'll see most of the vineyards are planted on slopes between 22 and 37 degrees. All right, it's bloody steep. 22 for the layman probably doesn't sound like it, but 22, I mean, even if you go up to 12 degrees, Dylan, it's already getting steep. But 22 to 37 degrees is really, really steep.
That's like difficult to stand up.
Yeah. So why is the best Syrahs grown there and not here in the flatlands? All right, so that's the most important thing to try and understand from these studies. So then I look at direct daylight hours. Okay, so there's enough daylight hours there. But then again, you'll see most of these red sites where Giggle and those guys are situated are between 10 and 12 hours, right? So very few vines are planted in the 8-hour region. It's because Syrah won't ripen with 8. And remember, this is in the middle of their harvest. So when we map in 14 February in South Africa, I map in the middle of their harvest because this is supposed to be the most intense time then. All right. And then you look at the solar radiation. All right. And this is the important one. So you'll notice that on slope, the flatlands looked obviously the better places to plant. But in energy that plant is going to receive, you see a golden thread running through. So what did the guys, well, the monks or the crusaders, or whoever started planting there, they found out through hundreds and years that Syrah needs in their region, it needs energy. And even for France, I mean, 3,700 compared, I mean, you see, this is more energy than we found in Priorat. So these Syrah vines receive enough energy to ripen. And the reason you see the back ends, there's nothing, they won't ripen. All right. So now you've got the parameters that the best Syrahs are grown at. And now you have to come back to South Africa and back to reality. All right, so let's look at elevation. So there's not a lot, we don't have a really high slope with a high elevation in this vineyard. This vineyard is situated on a little hill in Stellenbosch. But the important thing that you'll notice is if we look at slope, all right? And this is quite important. So this vineyard, forget the green is a contour path that runs through there, and this is also a path. So this vineyard is going to be planted between 18 and 33 degrees slope. It's bloody steep.
33,
and at 33,
nice.
that 33 is bloody steep. So this vineyard is planted slap bang in the middle of the parameters of slope in Côte-Rôtie. All right, so that's an important thing. Then we look at daylight hours. Just gonna put this legend on and then this hours. Okay, so now you see, we saw that they planted between 11 and 13, if I'm not mistaken, daylight hours. Let me just quickly get that going again. Yeah, they planted between 10 and 12, all right, daylight hours. Mm-hmm. We're planting between 10 and 13. So the daylight hours is spot on the same, all right? And you can see there's a huge divide in that vineyard, which is going to be important when designing the vineyard. Mm-hmm. So then we look at solar radiation, okay? And this is going to be the important one. So I explained in South African context, anything below 4,900 is considered low. All right. And you saw what the parameters are in, sorry, wrong one there. You saw what the parameters were in Côte-Rôtie. You saw what the parameters were in Priorat. And you can see the majority of this vineyard, of this Syrah, it's going to be planted Echelon vineyard, is between 3,900 and 3,300, which in a South African context is almost unheard of. And why is it like that? It's the slope, the degrees of the slope, which is really steep. That means development is expensive and difficult. But it's also that this vineyard faces straight up south. And it looks, let me just zoom out, straight towards Table Mountain and the Atlantic Ocean.
Oh, wow.
So the maritime influence on this vineyard is going to be profound. The radiation impact on this vineyard is going to be profound. And I think this client is listening in because he sent me a WhatsApp about it. So he, a very big,
hello, client. Hello.
I wondered why you weren't swearing so much. What's going on?
I told you I'm going to try and not swear a lot. So this client was advised by a very big personality in Stellenbosch to plant Cabernet Sauvignon there, because Stellenbosch is considered as a very, very good Cabernet Sauvignon region, which is true in the Helderberg, because the Helderberg boasts very high radiations. And the high radiations in the Helderberg translates to very, very low amounts of methoxypyrazines, which means the Helderberg Cabernet Sauvignons have phenomenal tannins, phenomenal aging potential, and phenomenal fruit palate. It doesn't have any cut grass or that green flavors, because the only way we can get rid of methoxypyrazines is through sunlight, and sunlight equals energy, right? So Cabernet Sauvignon would have been disastrous on this site. I mean, you probably should have just planted bell peppers and bottled that as cab. So through this study, we can see that this is the closest blueprint we can get to a Côte-Rôtie vineyard. And the result we'll taste in 5 years' time. But I mean, there's no way that if you have all of this information and you have got this blueprints, that the development of this scale is not going to be extremely successful. And Dylan, as I told you, there's the design comes in next with, and this plays an important role. So you'll see this vineyard is split into different sections, and you'll also see it split into sections, smaller sections according to solar radiation, but the biggest split that you've got there is according to daylight hours, all right? Because at 10 daylight hours, there's a lot of shadows on that vineyard. So it's not going to get a lot of direct sunlight. Remember, this is the peak of the season. The rest of the season, it gets like 8 hours of sunlight, where the guys in country tea does not want to plant. Fortunately, we have a bit of ambient temperature that's a bit higher. So in that section to the right, we spaced the vines further apart in the echelon to get a more, that they can get maximum sunlight around them.
So they're not shading each other as much.
They're not shading each other as much. So we're planting them 1.2 by 1.2. To the complete opposite left, where you have got a lot of daylight hours, we're planting 0.8 by 0.2. So we changed the interplanting spacing so that it's tighter together, so that they can overshadow each other a little bit to help them.
0.8 by 0.2, did you say?
No, 0.8 by 1.2. We always keep 1.2 within the row spacing. It just makes it easier for people to work.
Yeah.
So with regards to a study like this, you can see there's blueprints that you can take out from existing vineyards in any place, part of the world. You just need a GPS location and you need data. All right. And you
data rules.
Data rules, but you need to understand how to utilize that data. All right. So
well, you need to interpret it also.
For sure. And
so then that site below, like the one that you just showed before, there's vineyards above and below that. What variety are they? Have you laid your analysis on top of those?
Yeah, I actually tasted the wines. I mean, if Andre is listening now, it'll be good. So there's Merlot on the farm, and there's Syrah, and there's Sauvignon Blanc, and there is Semillon. All right. So the Semillon is actually quite good because it's a bit older already, and the Sauvignon Blanc is also very good. There's a bit more that we need to do in the vineyard to help that vineyard lose a bit of that green flavor. So we need sunlight into the vineyard to stimulate a bit of thiles. So that's leaf plucking, better suckering, opening up the vines. But I mean, if he didn't plant the vines, he bought the farm like that, all right? So that section. So if he knew what he knows now and he replants and he tasted, I mean, the Merlot is green. I mean, we tasted it on Monday and he said green. But the Merlot it's green in the sense that we don't work the vineyard as much. But now we know what irradiation we've got and we know what to do with the vineyard. Like I said, it's not a bad or a good situation. It's just a better or a worse situation. So,
and you know, and you have a measurement or a benchmark, you know how far you need to go. So you're like, right, we need to de-leaf seriously, or we need to get more exposure.
Yes. So we can dramatically increase the Merlot that's already planted there because we know what we're working with. We know the parameters. We know what's going to happen. So, and the Syrah that's there, we tasted the Syrah is awesome. But the best part is the Syrah is awesome, but it's not planted on the best part yet. So we already kind of have a carrot in front of our noses to say, listen here, we're going to do well. We're going to do bloody well. So yeah, I mean, and like I started that discussion is this is the way we should be looking at climate change. This is the way we should be looking at new varieties. We shouldn't be planting varieties just blindly all across the show, but we need to map them properly and in accordance to what we're going to taste from them. That's important.
Well, so we're coming up to time, but there's quite a few questions if you guys like to answer, which is Dietrich Cocco, hello, and thank you for joining. But he said the quantity of irradiation can have an impact on the chirality of the fructose. If yes, which one, S or I? And can I have a play on the amount of alcohol?
Just Dylan, you go.
No, well, when it comes down to the organic chemistry of that, I am not going to play with in which direction the fructose is leaning.
I mean,
Well, yes. So for a layman, what does that all mean? Maybe in the layman.
Well, I guess it's in reference to the species of sugar that is accumulating in the plant, and that's going to then be mediated by the yeast and the type of yeast in its conversion to alcohol, whether it's a fructophilic yeast, and if the structure of the fructose is either left or right, which way, how it's going to be processed into alcohol in its conversion.
Okay.
So you measure sugar by Beaumet, and you say, oh, roughly 13 Beaumet is 13% alcohol, given a 1-to-1 conversion, but conversions differ. Maybe it's along that path.
The one thing that I can say is that I've found, and Dylan, you might think about it like that too. I think that climate for that season has a more profound impact on the amount of fructose that's in the berries by picking than just site selection. Mm-hmm. If it's a very, very dry and stressful season, there's definitely a change in the fructose ratio. And if it's a very wet one, there's definitely a difference. So I think climatically,
your massive vintage variation.
It's got a bigger impact than just a terroir study.
Mm-hmm.
And then Mitch, who both Dylan and I know, said, like, how big of a factor is latitude when it comes to site selection?
No, latitude and longitude is a massive factor because it plays on the impact of the inclination of the sun. So it's got a huge impact.
And then Manfred, who is Italian, did also say that if you're ever in Chianti, then come along. Jaco. He said that, he said, please come along and drink loads of Sangiovese. Oh, well, taste it, but also drink it. And so it's a win.
Good man,
so
making friends.
Going to mail me some points.
Yeah.
I need some deep locations of a few Sangiovese vineyards. That's phenomenal. You can map.
Yeah, Jaco will take on data. He is very happy to process data because he loves it. Oh, Manfred is South African. But anything to just wrap up on YouTube about vineyard selection, GIS? We've covered mostly everything.
I want to say thanks for joining us and talking us through some of these models. For me, it's pretty amazing what can be done, and I still think that we're scratching the tip of the iceberg with this modeling data science in relation to viticulture. I know there's heaps of studies in it, but studies and my lean on it, which is like yours, Jaco, is you need boots on the ground. You need to understand the soil, how the rain falls, where the water flows, how you're managing that soil and those plants to get a good translation, because you can't just rely on pretty colors, but they can tell you a shitload.
And you and I, we had a discussion a few times. I mean, I wish there's more viticulturists around the world that's passionate and energetic about this, that can be part of a network that shares this, because we can all just learn from this. We need guys out in the field that doesn't keep all the data to their chest and contacts you and say, listen, I want to be part of a global project like this. I mean, I'm the viticulturist in Greece. I mean, can I help you guys? What information do you guys need? Do you need me to go and talk to the geological spatial guys? Or I think a network like that will be, especially where we're sitting in a global warming setup, where things are, well, definitely changing. I mean, we definitely need more. We need to rely more on each other to help each other how to do things like this. And I mean, especially the guys in France, I mean, in Bordeaux and those places, I mean, it's getting bloody hot there. I mean, reach out to guys that's already in regions that's hot. I mean, we can help you maybe. We can maybe learn with you. We've got data on warmer regions, but we know how to process the data to maybe build proper models for Burgundy, for Loire, for Bordeaux, into translating like what's going to happen in the next 15 years.
With the new varieties that are now allowed to be planted.
I mean, they're trying new varieties like willy-nilly. I mean, they could do this in a scientific way, which, like I said earlier, I mean, now they want to wait 5 or 6 years to figure out is it going to work. But geez, man, you can have proper data to say, listen here, at least we've done the R&D on this. At least we've done the due diligence to say, listen here, we have got these 2 scenarios, all right, and this is what we're going to go for. And at the end of 5 or 6 years, we either know this scenario works or this one doesn't work. Whereas if you just plant like that, you just say, like, it's like Petit Syrah in South Africa. I mean, people plant Petit Syrah right, left, and center, but it's going to have a bad name because it's a heavy bearer. Like Petit Syrah is a phenomenal variety. It just needs to be controlled properly, and you need to figure out how to manage the tannins in the shoulders. Otherwise, the variety is just going to be mediocre. So if you plant they probably plant the right varieties in Bordeaux of the new ones, but in the wrong sites. But they can study sites to plant in the right varieties. And yeah, I must say this hour went past very quickly because I've got 5,000 other stuff that I wanted to show you guys in Tasmania, in Sicily, in New Zealand.
Let's do it. I reckon we can.
We'll do another one. We'll do another one.
Everyone to tears. We should line up another one. This is such a massively powerful and specialized tool, not just pre-planting, but also post-planting management as well, which helps the growers, help the winemakers, helps the consumers, all to make tasty wine that makes sense in its place.
And I mean, part of GIS is remote sensing. I mean, that's a major factor. We haven't even touched SAVIs, soil adjusted vegetation indexes, or NDVIs, normalized differentiated vegetation indexes. We haven't touched drones. We haven't touched really on a lot of stuff that's part of the management tool that takes this data to step further.
Next one is, what have we done? We've done solar irradiation and elevation. So what other layers can we have? Let's do NDVI next, or let's do plant indexes.
We can do that. I mean, the thing with GIS is, that fascinates me, but also that kind of like makes me a bit crazy, is anything on the planet that has a spatial reference, meaning anything that's got, like you said, a latitude and a longitude, and that means anything on the planet can be mapped and interpolated. That means leaf roll virus, mealybugs, ESCA, all of those stuff can be represented visually. We've had a situation where we couldn't stop leaf roll virus from this one section until we started mapping it, and we built an interpolated map from the top. And we realized that on the neighbor's farm, there's a windbreak of olive trees that has a lot of mealybug in, but we don't spray that. We don't check that.
Wow.
So just because we could spatially see, listen here, the income is from this side. So we have to go and look what's going on there. It just puts your mind in a different perspective. And that's what makes drones amazing. It just changes your perspective. And then mapping things, like I said, anything can be mapped.
Well, today I was on a mule, on a quad bike type thing, driving through a vineyard at 5.5 kilometers an hour with a little Raspberry Pi computer sitting out the front, and it was counting the pixels of the vines, measuring the pruning mass per meter, and spitting out a map as I went along. So So we could see the pruning weight of a vineyard practically in real time. So we know how many buds to leave. We know why perhaps one area's got too much vigor or too little vigor. What do we need to do to manage it?
Another thing, before we
manage our time, what are we doing?
I know, but you guys want to continue talking. What am I supposed to do? Just shut up, you idiots! Like, shut up. Everyone hates you. Last one, and then you're done. That's it.
The last one. Another interesting thing mapping GIS is weeds. So I've done an exercise where I've mapped the whole farm with the soil survey. Then I drove with a quiet bike, and I drove with Google Maps, and I mapped every single weed I saw. I interpolated that into a GIS software program, and then you get color.
Are you mapping weed species or density, or both?
No, weed species.
Okay.
Weed species. So then I made an interpolated map of that. So then you've got a color map of what weeds grow where. Then you layer that onto pH, onto calcium magnesium ratios. And it is fascinating to see weeds are pioneer plants. They are not there because they are a weed. They are there to do a job. And
They're
if
there to
you-
heal. They're there to heal a soil where something's missing
Yeah,
or
so
out
if
of
you can
balance.
snap that into layers, you can understand what's going on in your soil just by looking at your weeds.
Weeds
Wild.
as bio-indicators. Yeah, that's
You finish
cool.
on weeds. That is mind blowing, really. Like, that is unbelievable. Anyway, thank you so much, everyone who joined for about an hour and 10 minutes. We'll do another one in a week or two. Jaco, thank you so much for all this
Yes.
information, which has taken like
Thank you.
years of your life, even though you look healthy and fine, which is good.
That's because I've got a beanie on. I don't have hair left anymore.
Oh, you
It
did
all
your hair
fell
for the
out from
show.
doing too much GIS.
But this is this is huge, and and hopefully there's a huge company for some reason who sees this and is just like, do you know what, maybe it's good for me to like get onto GIS. But we'll see you on the next one. Like, thank you from me,
And from me.
and thank you too.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
And we'll see you on the next one. But this has been amazing.
Hit us in the DMs if you want something, you want us to talk about something in particular.
Yes, and when I upload the video, this will be free for all, and it'll be also it'll be a podcast eventually as well once I get around to that. But thanks a lot, guys. Bye bye.
Cheers.